So I wanted to make another video about historic preservation, and I know that I already made one, but I've noticed some things as I've become more vocal about historic preservation, especially when it comes to being green and environmentally friendly. In fact, when I bring it up to friends, it kind of goes a little bit like this. So I was thinking about getting into historic preservation. Like, I would really actually like to restore, a house, like my house. Why would you want to do that? Like, that's not green. Like, those houses are not efficient at all. Like, that's a terrible idea. Well, I mean, stop being a jerk. Just let her talk. Like, God, she's just trying to tell you about your heritage. That's not a good idea. Like that's, you could just knock that down and build something like progress. You could build a greenhouse. Like, these aren't green. That's like the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So that's more important than your history? Guys? Shouldn't we be concerned about the environment right now? I mean, come on, like, everyone's concerned about the environment right now. That's just not green. They should just knock them down. Gosh. Okay. So, I mean, there are a lot of opinions on the subject. There are a lot. So here's my 2 cents on the whole thing. You can maintain the historical integrity of a house and still yet have it be green. I mean, yes, I know that historic homes are not that efficient. I live in one right now, and my utility bill is a little higher than I would like. But there are a lot of changes you can make, especially if you're a concerned homeowner, and they're easy fixes. So let's just calm down for a second. And let me just bring to your attention some things that you may have missed along the way. Like this very clear, commonsensical thing. Is that a word? Commonsensical? Whatever, I'm using it. So if you're a child in the 90s like me, reduce, reuse, recycle was pretty much ingrained on your brain. And what's more green than recycling? And what are you doing when you're restoring an old house? Well, you're recycling. Okay. You're reducing the amount of waste because you're not knocking down a house to build up another one that you might knock down in, say, 20, 30 years. You're reusing the house. If you're rehabilitating an old house, like for instance, I know in Chicago and other urban places, they are reusing industrial sites and turning them into lofts that, by the way, go for a lot of money. And so here's what I have to say. If you're rehabilitating something that might be knocked down or demolished and you're using it for living, for space to rent to musicians or artists or then you're recycling that. How awesome and green is that? So that just seems to make sense to me. Does that make sense to you? Because it makes sense to me. But some other things I want to point out that might not be quite as obvious are the following. There are a lot of plantations in northern Florida, and I've been to a fair amount of plantation homes, and I can tell you this. In Florida, it's freaking really hot in the summer. Really hot. Can you imagine living in like 90-degree weather all the time without air conditioning? Well, let me tell you something. The people in these plantation homes did exactly that. I mean, come on, they didn't have air conditioning in like 1890. That just was not around. So let me just shed some light on some architectural features that these homes utilize to make them more comfortable. And thus, by making them more comfortable, you're spending less energy keeping your house comfortable. Here's what I mean. In Florida, your house gets really hot. So these plantation owners, what they did with their lovely southern like palaces was they made their ceilings really tall so that the hot air would rise, so that the living space was cooler. They also put dormers. By dormers I meant transoms. They put transoms above their door, which are like little windows that you can open so you can keep your door shut but still keep airflow. They also had really wide doors and really wide hallways to keep air flowing throughout the house. It also had like overhanging eaves to provide shade in the house. If you're in the north, that would sometimes provide insulation, keeping the snow like away from your house. Anyway, not important, but these architectural features make the home more comfortable. And if your home is already that much more comfortable because you have these features in your home, then you're spending less money to keep your house cool or warm, depending on your climate. So, I mean, come on. That's green. That's like green pre-green. Like, right? How smart is that? That is so smart. Maybe I'm just getting a little, like, overly enthusiastic right now. I apologize. And the last thing I want to point out, if you are restoring a home and you want to have your tax credit, then you have to keep with the guidelines of the Secretary of the Interior for rehabilitation, which says you have to use, if possible, similar materials in the home when you're, like, I don't know, refurbishing or whatever. And a lot of the time, these materials are local materials. Local wood, local timber, whatever. Wherever you're from, whatever you want to call it. And if you're using, like, local materials, then they're not traveling nearly as far to you. And I'm not exactly sure how you calculate a carbon footprint, but I can tell you that it's a heck of a lot smaller. You have less of an impact on the environment if you're using local materials, as opposed to shipping wood from across the country to your house. So there you go. Those are my things on how, historic preservation can be green. And hopefully that will calm down some of the debates that have gone on in front of me. Probably not, but I like to think that they will.